Hello everyone, this is Gunnerstoffer again, and this is part 5 of Cheerilee's Garden. I'm pretty much halfway done with the story now, and you know what? I'm gonna try to finish it. I don't care how long it is. I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna finish it all for today. Today for Halloween, and yeah, this is gonna be it's gonna be a long one, but at least I'll be finished with it. So anyways, this is part 5 of Cheerilee's Garden, and here we go. Cheerilee made her way through the backstage area, albeit a good distance away from the whole snails thing, and headed for the dressing room. After that scene with Sweetieville, two soliloquy scenes followed, one with Reginald and the other with the king. Since she took her sweet time, that first one had almost certainly ended already, but as the mayor passed a few corridors leading up to the stage itself, she thought it could still hear Apple Bloom's voice on stage. If she hurried, she might still be able to assist Snips in finding his costume for the last scene. If he was indeed as dumb as he looked, and hadn't been able to find it on his own yet. As she rounded a corner, something crashed into her at high speed, causing her to stumble back a few steps as the air got slammed out of her lungs. She looked down as she got her bearings and saw Snips sitting there on his plot, shaking his head to dispel the dizziness that set on due to the crash. Snips, what are you doing here? And not even in costume. You need to get ready for the last scene, she said by way of a reprimand. The Cyan Colt with the ochre mare mane looked hugely relieved to see his teacher as he immediately scrambled to his feet, tears in the corner of his eyes as he started talking. "Oh, Miss Cheerilee, it's terrible," he yelled out. "I was looking for my costume and I couldn't find it, so I went looking for you. I couldn't find you. But I found snails and he took a huge breath, at this point obviously struggling to get the words out. "And he's dead." Cheerilee's world grinded to a halt with those words, cold sweat breaking out across her forehead as she felt the slightest hint of panic rise up from her stomach like bile. She strayed from her schedule and she just found out what that would come to cost her. Her mind worked frantically to figure out a way to minimize the damage caused to somehow soothe the colt enough so that her plans could go through. But no easy solution presented itself. Snips, on the other hand, seemed to pull himself together, turn around and take a few steps. "Come on," he called back to her. "We can't continue the play now. We gotta tell the others." Cheerilee felt a block of ice drop into her stomach as the Cyan Colt galloped off. "No, if he reached any pony else, he would." With a sudden burst of speed that have dazzled even Rainbow Dash, she rushed forward, catching up to the younger pony in mere seconds. In one fluid movement, he slipped from a full gallop into a full-blown karate kick, focusing all her kinetic energy into a single hoof. Snips got hit good in the side, so good in fact that the kick sent him crashing into a nearby wall, at the bottom of which he fell down into a crumpled heap. Cheerilee silently thanked Rainbow Dash for all the time she came to give the kids some karate lessons. Some of it had obviously stuck in her head over the years. Before the Colt could do more than roll into his back, Cheer descended upon him like a hawk, keeping him down with one hoof, and she started beating him in the face with the other, in the throes of blind rage. Here is one who stood between her and reaching her goal, as she could think of nothing but removing him from her path right away, no matter the cost. Snips feebly tried to defend himself, but he was a lot smaller than the mare, not to mention a unicorn, while she has all the physical prowess of an earth pony to fall back on. The beating continued mercilessly. Snip's face face swelling up and blood running down his nose and down from the places where she broke through the skin. In an act of desperation, the subconscious part of his mind reached out to magical reserves he didn't even think he had, and his horn started to glow green with power. All of a sudden, a wave of arcane energy zipped past Cheerilee's head, leaving a long thin cut stretching a length of her cheek. The fuchsia color made Mare gasped and surprised as blood started trickling down from the wound, which wasn't all that serious, although it did sting a little. Her gaze dropped down to the cult's cutie mark, and she realized she should have seen this coming. His speciality obviously involved cutting of some kind, and apparently he wasn't restricted to the use of scissors. A subtle change in the aura around his horn warned Cheerilee that another spell was about to be flung at her. So with no other option in mind, she raised her hoof before ramming it down to dish out another punch. Only this time she didn't aim for Snips' face, but the horn itself. As she hit her target, the colt's head jerked back as he groaned as the horn tugged at his skull, the spell discharging into the wall behind him instead of its intended target. The magical light around the horn flickered for a moment before coming back in force, and Cheerilee just knew that the next spell was already on its way. She once again started raining down punches, now aiming all of them at the horn. Spells exploded against the walls, ceiling, and floor left and right, sending tiny pieces of rubble flying everywhere. At first the colt took a beating like a stallion, but as the mare hit the same spot time and time again, it became increasingly difficult for him to fight back against the pain that was rising in his skull. All of a sudden, little cracks started to appear on his horn, until one final strike from Cheerilee broke it clear off. When that happened, magic exploded into the room, throwing Cheerilee off the colt and making her slide several meters off the floor, until she came to a halt a few meters away from Snips. The magical feedback seemed to have been a lot worse for the cyan pony himself, as he lay witlessly on the floor. Scrambling to her hoofs, the fuchsia mare picked up Snips' horn, and she passed it on the way of his motionless form, clutching it between her front hooves like a dagger as she kneeled over him. With a moment's hesitation, she rammed the horn down straight into his chest. Blood spattered everywhere and welled up underneath Cheerilee's hooves. The colt shot open, and he first stared at his chest, and then at her. "Why?" he managed to whisper hoarsely as life fled from his body. Cheerilee didn't bother to answer his question, simply pulling the horn out of his body and ramming it back into his chest a few times for good measure, until he stopped moving altogether. Cheerilee panted heavily from actual physical exertion this time, as she rolled off of Snips' corpse, trying to catch her breathing as she just lay on the cold floor. Killing him like this had been quite exhilarating on its own right, even if it did all end rather fast. She looked over her own cheeks, sampling her own blood for the first time, and finding it not altogether unpleasant, even if it did feel a bit strange. She was glad she'd been able to try this struggle for survival approach at least once, though, even if her original plan for Applebloom and him had been 1,000 times more elegant. The realization suddenly hit her with sickening force. Her plans for Snips and Applebloom. The plan required both of them to maneuver each other into the right places, and even after that, the next few steps also required interaction between them. Now that Snips is gone, it couldn't possibly work, and that was the least of her troubles. The play was still had one scene to go, and Snips is supposed to be in it. The mare began thinking up countless new plans on the spot, but she rejected all of them out of hand for being too ridiculous, too short-sighted, too dangerous, too risky. She began to fear the situation was hopeless, that she had finally maneuvered herself into a corner she could not escape from. To keep the audience in the dark, the final scene had to go through without a hitch. So someone had to go there to play against Apple Bloom. With no pony else left from the original cast, she could only count on herself. She had to improvise, and it probably would not work. But it was the best shot she had. The only shot she had. She quickly galloped towards the dressing area and headed in the back room, wiping the blood off herself with a rag before opening the chest that had Reginald's final costume. It was way too small for her, of course, but it included a particularly dashing brooch she could use as a fastener. Cheerilee quickly picked up the brooch and continued on towards the back of the room, where several bolts of cloth lay stashed. She chose a black piece that was just large enough to fit around her body, and swung over her back, using the brooch as a clasp in her neck to end up with something vaguely reminiscent of a hooded cloak. She wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but since the audience would only see her from far away, it just might do. At least she hoped so. As a finishing touch, she slid a knife she found on a nearby shelf through the fabric, improvising some manner and sheath so that the blade rested against her chest, relatively hidden. The mare then dashed off in the direction of the stage, realizing she had no time left to waste. She brought up a mental map of the building on the fly, to figure out exactly where she had to go. For the next scene, Reginald was supposed to emerge out of a mountain cave after the king had climbed up the mountain to meet his challenge. Knowing that, Cheerilee returned and rounded a turn and rushed up the flight of stairs, emerging at last into a dark cave at the top of the mountain. From here, she could see the audience, but she was quite sure the darkness still hid her from them. Judging from the fact that Apple Bloom was nowhere in sight, she had made it in time. She quietly congratulated herself over this accomplishment as she took a few moments to catch her breath and rest up. Fearing that she may soon need the energy, it only took her a minute to start hearing the filly's voice coming closer. And pretty soon after that she came into view, having made her way up the mountain slope. She was wearing relatively simple attire compared to the royal mantle from earlier. She had a sheathed toy sword with her, attached to her side where she could easily reach for the pommel with her teeth. Reginald, I have come to face your challenge. Come out and fight like a stallion, King Goldencrown roared, looking around defiantly. Cheerilee took one deep breath and hid her face a bit deeper under the hood, even though she wasn't sure why. It wouldn't fool anyone, or not for very long at least. Swallowing back her fear, she stepped out of the cave and into the highest point of the stage. The mountain summit was located several meters above the mine Scootaloo had disappeared into earlier, but as it was placed all the way to the back of the stage, even the ponies occupying the front rows could still see the actors up there relatively easy. Cheerilee could hear the crowd talking and whispering to each other as she stepped out of the shadows. They obviously wondering why in the haste she was doing up there on the stage. Apple Bloom herself was even more confused, as she had expected to see Snips there, not her teacher. Miss Cheerilee, what are you? She began to say quietly. I see you have come, O brave king, and I applaud your bravery. As a token of my respect, I shall face you here in my true form. Upon my true form. Up till now, witchcraft and sorcery has hidden me from your eyes, but no longer. Tonight we fight an honest battle. Cheerilee's voice boomed through the complex, easily going over Apple Bloom's. The explanation sounded tacky, even to her own ears, but it was the best she'd been able to come up with at such short notice. In a sudden moment of inspiration, she gave Apple Bloom a conspirator's wink, praying the filly would play along. Whatever the filly had assumed cheer meant by it, she suddenly grinned and nodded eagerly, as if to say, "Oh, I get it." Oh, fiend, I knew there was more afoot when you bested my most trusted advisors. Witchcraft. This explains a lot indeed, the king responded, Applebloom's accent playing up slightly as they strayed from the original script. But the future mayor couldn't have cared less at that point, so relieved that she to see the other pony playing along with the ruse. Well then, let us dance, she cried out as she reached her right hoof under her cloak and draw the knife, keeping 3 hoofs on the floor as she pointed the blade to her opponent. The filly in turn took the pommel of her toy sword between her teeth and assumed a combative stance. The sword was far too big for her to carry in a hoof, as Cheerilee did with her knife. So for her, this is the only option. That alone made the odds heavily favor the mayor, and on top of that, one of them was wielding a real knife, where the other one had only a mostly harmless plastic toy. The entire fighting scene had been carefully choreographed, so Applebloom naturally stuck to her predetermined moves, as she expected Cheerilee to play by the book as well. Cheerilee would certainly have been capable of doing so had she been so inclined, since she was the one who planned out the entire thing. She was, however, extremely anxious to get it all over with quickly. As soon as Applebloom advanced, Cheerilee stepped forward as well, intentionally allowing herself to get within reach of the filly's sword. Instead of parrying Applebloom's swing with her dagger as the filly expected, she jerked her head back to dodge it, confusing the hay out of Applebloom and throwing her balance off completely. The fuchsia mare quickly followed up with an attack of her own, which left a nasty cut over the filly's left cheek. Almost the twin of the cut Cheerilee still had under her head. Applebloom let off a sharp cry, no more out of surprise than out of pain, and as she stumbled backwards, she looked at the red liquid dripping down the tip of the knife, and then at Cheerilee, who stared back coldly from underneath the hood. Wait, is that Ree? She began saying, the words muffled by the pummel of her mouth, but Cheerilee didn't at all feel like letting down the pressure now and simply rushed forward. Applebloom panicked and swung her sword, hitting Cheerilee right in the face in the process. Cheerilee almost lost her balance as her head got slanted to the side, but somehow she managed to turn the movement to a 180-degree spin, bucking her hind legs at the filly. She hit her right in the chest, and the sheer force of the blow sent the little one flying across the stage until she landed roughly on her back a meter or two away. The filly took a deep breath, a stinging pain in her chest alerting her to the fact that all was not well, and she didn't seem to be able to draw in as much air as usual either. She realized Cheerilee had probably broken some of her ribs, and she felt dazed from the landing too. The teacher, however, wasted no time and descended upon the fallen Applebloom like a vulture, ramming the knife through her right shoulder and into the wooden floor below, effectively pinning her down. The filly held back a shriek of pain and swung her sword again, hitting Cheerilee in the head once more. It barely fazed the mare, although it did piss her off. All of a sudden, she brought her head down and headbutted the filly brutally, hoping to knock her out. This is exactly what happened with as Applebloom's eyes rolled back in her head. Suddenly becoming acutely aware of the audience staring up at her, Cheerilee remembered her last lines, the words traditionally spoken at the end of original play. Even though she had to change it up a bit, she clutched her head as if she had been fatally wounded by that last blow, and then spoke dramatically. Oh, what cruel fate! Now we both must die, but I implore you all, stallions and mares, never to forget Reginald the Sly. And then she allowed herself to fall onto the floor, remaining there motionlessly. She never understood those words herself. or what moral lesson they were supposed to convey, but they got the job done. The technician got the cue, and the curtains started to close. As the audience started stomping their hooves down into the floor and cheered to show their approval. The play had been, on the whole, pretty well done, and the curious alternate ending did add a certain something. Not to mention the last fighting scene had been gorgeous. It didn't look like they were just pretending at all. With relief, Cheerilee saw the curtain finally close completely, hiding the stage from the audience's sight. She spread the word that the Phillies and herself would have to start breaking down the stage props and cleaning up the backstage area right away, since some other group from Canada needed the building later that week. That meant nobody was expecting them back soon anytime soon. She threw a glance at the unconscious Philly next to her, who still had the knife embedded in her shoulder, and smiled. She had all the time she needed to figure out something new for this one now. All the time in the world. Apple Bloom, in her half-awakened state, suddenly felt a cold glass being pressed against her lips. She instinctively opened her mouth to drink, quickly swallowing what she believed to be water. It only took her a few sips to realize, even in her groggy state, that what she was drinking wasn't water at all. For one, it had a sort of metallic aftertaste, and for another, there were small bits and pieces in it that sort of resembled. At once, she was wide awake, coughing and spitting out the last of the fluid in her mouth. She had been bound to some sort of wooden table with leather straps. She saw Cheerilee standing next to her, holding a glass filled with the red liquid, grinning wickedly at herself. I thought you liked it. Scootaloo made it herself. You know, she really poured herself into that one, you could say. Oh, shit. The mayor cackled maniacally as horror flashed across the filly's face. Scootaloo? You, killed her? Ah, yes. Afraid so. She was the first to go, you know. And you're the last, the mayor said, feeling uncharacteristically chatty. The filly turned pale. You killed all of them? Oh, goodness, no, she replied, grinning as relief spread over the filly's face. I didn't kill snails. That was all you. You mean the way you made that spotlight, or sun if you wish, fall down on him. Glorious. Tears filled Apple Bloom's eyes as the realization hit her that all of her friends were gone, and that her fate was likely to be any different. What? Why? She managed to let out as Cheerilee picked up a knife and held it to the light appraisingly. Why? Because you all deserved it. Each and every one of you is a blight upon this land, a weed in my garden, and it's time to end it. The mayor said coldly as she positioned herself at the end of the table near the filly's hind legs. So, shall we? Slowly and carefully, the mayor made an incision above the filly's hoof, cutting neatly around the circumference of her leg. Applebloom tried to squirm, but the leather straps effectively held her in place as they dug into her skin. Cheerilee slipped the knife under her skin, carefully cutting the skin loose from the filly's flesh. The pain this caused was immense, but the filly clenched her teeth and refused to acknowledge it. Every bit as stubborn as her sister was, not wanting to give Cheerilee the pleasure of hearing her scream. Cheerilee obviously thought she cut enough for now, as she took hold of the flap of skin she cut loose with her teeth. Slowly she put it up the filly's legs, ripping more skin off as she went, flaying the filly alive. Despite her brave effort, this is simply too much for any pony to endure quietly, and Applebloom's scream rang out through the empty complex. Cheer continued making new incisions every time she accidentally tore the skin completely off, and then continued the flame from there. Pretty soon, half of the filly's leg was a bloody heap of bare flesh. Every little twitching going through the exposed muscles, an agonizing experience. Blood dropping from everywhere. But still, Cheers showed no sign of stopping as she continued cutting, and flames slowly moved up. Eventually, the filly's entire leg was a disgusting, skinless mess. Cheerilee sadistically breathed out on it for a while, making Applebloom shiver in pain. The little light sparked in Cheer's eyes as she bowed down and extended her tongue, slowly dragging it all the way from the filly's hoof up to her flank. For a moment, the mare thought the screams that followed would deafen her permanently, before she pulled her tongue back into her mouth and savored the taste. You're quite good. Want a taste? She whispered in the filly's ear. Fuck you! The Kingdom Crusader managed to stammer. Cheerilee laughed, amused by Applebloom's defiant nature. This one may be able to take some punishment yet. She diligently started cutting up the filly's other leg, making a long incision across the length of the leg this time, pulling the skin off towards the side instead of upwards. The filly still tried to resist and keep up appearances, but she slowly started sobbing and shivering as the pain became too much to bear. Her breathing became ragged and her skin turning pale as her vividly scarlet blood coated the floor. As she gained more confidence with the knife, her movements started to become quicker, and in one fluid motion, the first cut of skin from the filly's left flank, and then moved right over to cut off the skin of the right. She picked up the two pieces of skin with her teeth and held them before the filly, before tossing them aside. Saw those? Those where your cutie marks would have been, if you had one. You never will know. Guess your crusading days are over. This is from that reminds me of that one meme that my sister found. And this is where I put a cutie mark. If I had one! Oh, sorry, lost the happy, but the happy's back. Yeah, if you don't get what that show is, you're an idiot. This realization finally did what the pain had been able to do. It shattered the filly's last vestiges of resistance. From one moment to the next, she started to cry loudly, her body shaking wildly, using up way more energy on all that than she should. Cheer started cutting up strips of skin on the filly's chest until the word "weed" was spell out there. By now, the filly has lost enough blood and wasted enough energy that her responses started to become sluggish, ruining some of Cheerilee's fun. She tried poking a knife into a few pressure points, but her reaction was so underwhelming that Cheer shrugged and decided to call it quits. She undid the leather straps and pulled the tub out from under the table, the exact same one she had squeezed Scootaloo out into earlier, and Scootaloo was still there. Not wanting to simply wait until Applebloom bled out, the mare pulled her off the table by her hair, dropping her straight into the tub. The blood and pieces of gore suddenly surrounded her, stung on her bare flesh, and she let out a soft hiss. As Applebloom took in the scent of the blood, she saw an eye driftily slowing by, and suddenly realized just what she had been dropped in. This notion seemed to renew her strength as she scrambled to get out of the tub, but Cheerilee would have none of it. She grabbed the filly by the hair with the hoof and forced her down into the pool of blood, keeping her mouth and nostrils under. The filly screamed, swallowing mouthfuls of Scootaloo in the process as she thrashed her legs about wildly, splattering the contents of the tub everywhere. Air bubbled up from her mouth, but Cheerilee kept her there firmly, ecstatic to see the filly struggling die down slowly. As Applebloom's lungs started to burn more, she involuntarily tried to breathe breathe away, filling her lungs with blood and gore. After the last erratic twitch of one of her legs, Apple Bloom remained motionless. The fuchsia-colored mare waited a few more seconds before finally releasing the filly. Apple Bloom's mutilated body just kept lying still in the pool of blood that had once been Scootaloo, and Cheerilee knew that her task had finally come to an end. All that was left was simply clean up. She sat back and cried tears of joy, overcome with emotion that she realized she might finally get her life back on the rails now, with a new class next year, a class of nice fillies and colts instead of the monsters she had had. She felt proud to have played her part in making Equestria a better place. Proud of ever protected the future generations from poisonous influences that would have hampered their growth, which in turn would have hampered others. The consequences would have been quite dire, to say the least. Humming a cheerful tune, she went to get cleaned up once again, and then went over to her stash of flammable liquids. It takes some time by herself, but she got the job done. She felt like she was walking on clouds. Nothing would stop her now. Fire sprung up all around her, stopping her right in her tracks. She realized too late that she had not thought this through. She spread flammable stuff everywhere and then lit a few fires in different places, but she had underestimated the speed at which the flames would spread. And now she was here, not too far from the exit, but unable to proceed due to the problems she herself had created. She backed off into the center of the room, as far away as the flames as possible. But as soon as she got there, she already had to jump out of the way with the burning crossbeam, which only barely missed her. Various patches of fur on her body were already singed from the flames as she barely dodged, and soot and ash covered her from tip to hoof. Smoke started to fill the room, and Cheerilee herself felt herself slowly suffocating as every breath she took drew some more of it into her lungs. As her breathing became troubled, she laughed softly, wondering if her day of liberation would also be the day she died. She consoled herself that a noble death, after having completed her mission, was still infinitely better than the life she had been living before, in a world where these Colton fillies were still alive. Just as she started to think the situation was hopeless, a burst of purple light exploded from the exit ahead, wood splintering in the explosion. Surprisingly, the blast seemed to have sucked the life out of most of the flames between her and the exit. So summoning that last of her strength, Cheerilee made a beeline for the exit. As she got closer, she could hear voices talking to each other urgently. Worry thickened their voices. Do it again, Twy. Do it again. That took a lot out of me. I don't think this is the best way to Cheerilee burst out of the burning building, smoke trailing behind her as she collapsed on the grass just outside of the theater complex. Immediately, several ponies rushed forward to her help. As she looked up, she saw Twilight Sparkle, Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, Rarity, and Fluttershy standing around here with concerned look in their eyes. Are you okay? Where are the children? I teleported us all here as soon as we saw the smoke, Twilight said, the other five nodding. Cheerilee opened her mouth, her voice hoarse and crackling from the smoke as she spoke. The inside fire, no idea how, she said, but the effort took a lot out of her. Shoot, we can't wait, we need to get him now, Rainbow Dash cried out. Just wait, the purple mare replied calmly. I can see the other ponies crossing the river already. Pretty soon but Rainbow Dash didn't listen. Utilizing her trademark speed, she dashed through all the flames and disappeared into the building, quickly followed by Rarity and Applejack, who were both yelling the names of their respective little sisters. What now? Fluttershy said shakingly as she and Pinkie Pie waited for Twilight's direction. Form a bucket line, the unicorn commanded, the other two ponies quickly dashing off in the direction of the river to organize the other ponies in one long line. As the first buckets got passed to the front and thrown into the fire, both Cheerilee and Twi could see the effort was in vain. The water didn't seem to make any difference as bucket after bucket was thrown into the flames. Yet they just kept getting bigger and hotter. From where they lay on the ground, Cheerilee suspected that any evidence against her might already be long lost, but she wasn't willing to take the bet. Suddenly, the purple pony seemed to get fed up with waiting and worrying about her friends. An idea came to her. She called upon her magical reserves, restraining herself to the maximum as her horn began to glow more and more. Ponies watched on in awe as a purple trail of light sprang up between the river and the theater, and the river started to alter its course. In a matter of seconds, a wall of water suddenly rushed forward at the theater walls, crushing everything in its path. Cheerilee was hit by a rush of panic. This just might be enough to put out the fire. She shouldn't have worried, although the unleashed fury of the river did indeed put an end to the flames. It also washed away the weakened theater building itself, smashing it all against the ground. As Twilight, exhausted, stopped applying her magical might to it, the water of the river started to recede, dragging a lot of rubble and the like with it. Twilight looked around the disaster area fearfully for a few moments, then breathed a sigh of relief as the three friends climbed from between the rubble, battered and bruised and a little singed, but otherwise okay. But the fillies and colts they'd been looking for were nowhere in sight. Twilight threw a few questioning glances at her friends, but they were all shook their heads as tears filled their eyes. Nobody had managed to find them in the inferno. As the reality of the situation hit them, their emotions got the best of them as they let go of their tears. They were quickly joined by a awakening Cheerilee, who shed tears of pure relief. A week or two has passed since the incident, and a lot had happened. Several investigations had looked into the cause of the fire, but the fire itself and the water that followed had destroyed anything that could have given the investigators even the slightest clue. Cheerilee always looked confused and heartbroken whenever she got questioned, claiming she was taking care of something on the other end of the other side of the complex when the fire broke out. Although some ponies wondered if this could be considered some form of negligence, no official complaints against her were filed. The cleaning effort had been ongoing for an entire week, and even now bits and pieces of rubble still turned up here and there. During the week following the quote-unquote disaster, a joint burial ceremony was held for all the fillies and colts who died at once. Although all the caskets have been filled with stone and belongings of the dead, since none of the bodies have been found, every pony got very emotional, including Cheerilee, who cried cheers of joy as her struggle finally came to an end. A lot of ponies came to tell her that it was okay and things would be alright, or that it wasn't your fault. Cheerilee constantly had to take care not to accidentally respond to these in the wrong ways, so she was quite relieved when it was finally over. And soon, 2 weeks passed. Cheerilee grunted and moaned, sweating profusely in the warmth of the sun. It had taken her a lot of effort, and she'd certainly be sore in the morning, but she didn't care. She'd finally done it. She took a few steps back to admire her work, and marveled at the perfect state her garden was once again in. Then, there and then, she made a solemn vow, a sacred pact with herself. I, Cheerilee, will never let any weeds take over my garden ever again. Damn, finally I'm finished with that story. yeah. There you go, Sean, you fucking sick psycho. Well, I hope you can pretty much take whatever shit a Serbian film has in there. I am so gonna laugh at your reaction if you're actually even gonna react to it or review it, maybe. Well, anyways, that was Cheerilee's Garden, and I had to say, well, particularly, I am not a big fan of gore fix in any way, but I had to admit it was alright. You know, the death scenes were actually pretty creative. I mean, I think some of those death scenes could be like straight out of Saw or something. But you know, since this is pretty much going to be the only grimdark I'm going to do on this channel, so well, anyways, that was Cheerilee's Garden, and I hope you guys have a happy Halloween. Hope you get a shitload of candy, and I'm not gonna get any candy, but you know, I'll hang out. I'll hang out with my friends dressed up as Ghostface. So anyways, this is Gen Rollins 211 Gunnar Stoffer signing off. Fuck, I had to do it.